Our next speaker is Arnold Kochari. Arnold is the project manager and developer of Webmaster at the SciLifeLab data center. Much of his focus during the pandemic has been on establishing and developing the Swedish COVID-19 portal, and also in supporting COVID-19 projects funded by SciLifeLab and Knut and Alice Wallenberg Foundation. So please, Arnold.
Thank you. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Right. So in spring 2020, our team received an assignment from the Swedish Research Council to build and run the Swedish National COVID-19 data portal. And the aim of the data portal was to become a hub for COVID-19 research and to support sharing of data by providing services, tools, and databases. And open data sharing is especially important in case of a pandemic like COVID-19 because progress had to be made very rapidly. In order for the new therapeutics to be developed, in order to understand how the disease affects human body and so on, the scientific progress had to be made very fast. And one way to do that is to really share the data between different researchers and to collaborate a lot. And that was our goal, to foster data sharing and collaborations. Here, I just want to show that we have done a lot of work since the beginning, and not only in terms of the number of visitors that we got on our website with information, but also we have been tracking the data that has been shared by Swedish researchers relevant to COVID-19, and we have been giving hands-on support to individual research projects. And as I said, our goal is to facilitate open data sharing. And as we know, FAIR does not necessarily need to be open. However, open data, in order for it to be useful, needs to be fair. And that's really the main point that I'm going to make today in this presentation, that even if you share your data openly, it's not necessarily good quality or useful unless it is fair. And I will just make a few points with advice that we give researchers. So one of the things that we do on the portal is we have a data highlights section where we try to lift up and showcase research that has made a large impact, but has also shared data. But in order for the openly shared data to be found and useful, it needs to be fair. And so one of the main points of FAIR is that data should have a unique and persistent identifier, there should be provenance information, there should be a license, and so on. So this is what we recommend our researchers when we talk to them, and this is also the only way for us to find data. Also importantly, there should be a good data availability statement in the papers where it is clearly described what is available, where it is available, and what if there are any restrictions to data access. What we also do on the portal is we provide guidelines for data sharing and submission to different repositories. And they're one of the kind of main points that we make is that there should be good metadata associated with the data. And we also have a section on the portal where we have a curated list of already shared data by Swedish researchers. Here, it's important to say that it's not just data that we list, but also sometimes metadata on the records. And one of the points of FAIR is the kind of, the importance of metadata. So if you can share your data openly, do so, but also include useful metadata with it. But even if you cannot share your data openly, you can still share a metadata record. And you can do that, for example, in our own SciLifeLab data repository, but also in many other repositories. And this metadata record would include information about the data. And even if yeah, well, and the point is that it will stay available. So even if people cannot look at your data, they can still look at your metadata, and we will pick it up on the portal. We also see that a lot of researchers share code. So they share analysis code, which comes together with data, which is great. And we ourselves also share the website code on GitHub. And the fact that we shared our code openly is a great start, but it wouldn't be useful without good documentation. And so what we have is we have quite detailed documentation about how it works, how to set it up. And as a result of that, several other national European portals have actually reused our code. Now, in case of our website code, this was not relevant, but for research analysis code, we recommend that it's not just shared on GitHub, but it's actually deposited in a data repository or in some other way where it can get a unique and persistent identifier where some provenance information will be included and so on. And this will make the code more fair. So the take-home messages that I hope I have conveyed in this short presentation is that, well, one, open data sharing is important for accelerating research, but it's not enough for data to just be open. It also needs to be fair. That unique and persistent identifiers, clear licenses, and data availability statements are important for your open data to be findable. That metadata is important for both open and closed data. And even if you cannot share your data, you can still share metadata, which is one of the important points of FAIR. And that good documentation is important to make analysis code useful, but also deposit your analysis code in a repository where it can get persistent identifier, provenance information, and so on. This is in principle it, and this is the team behind the portal. What I wanted to also mention is that the portal is continuing its work on COVID-19. So anyone working on COVID-19 is welcome to talk to us, but also in the future, or already soon, we are transitioning to like widening our scope, and we will be focusing on pandemic preparedness in general. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is kind of reiterate the reasons why we think that open data sharing is important. So open data sharing improves transparency, reproducibility, it generates new insights, prevents data loss, and it really helps you find collaborators. And especially in a field like COVID-19, where accelerating research is important, open data sharing is a big part of that. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Arnold. Are there any questions for Arnold? Have you been able, I'm trying to phrase this thought I have. You have had data sets being produced by different groups and so on, and you stress the metadata aspects of that. And have you been able to do some comparison and looking at some sort of convergence on recommending what to include in that metadata? Akin to this community things that Eric talked about.
Yes, so we do. We have hands-on support meetings with different research projects, and very often we get questions, oh, what do I share? And one of the, we have a really good team where we have some kind of good knowledge of different range of life science fields, but we still cannot give recommendations for very community-specific metadata standards, or and every time when we have such a meeting, we say, what is it that is acceptable common in your community? And once people get asked this question, very often they know exactly what it is. It's just about asking that question and kind of directing their thoughts in that direction. And at least in my experience, they do find there, yes, actually, this is where we share data, and this is how we share normally data. This is where I normally find this kind of data. So we ourselves cannot recommend it, but when we talk to researchers, they actually can come up with it themselves.
How, what's your estimate of how much data goes into domain-specific repositories versus going into a more general purpose repository like the SciLifeLab data repository? Do you have a feeling for that?
Yes, I do have a feeling for that, and I can ask my colleague Katerina to also maybe comment on that. I would say that by far most of the data goes to the domain-specific repositories. Very little ends up in the general repositories. This is also because that's what we recommend, of course. So when we talk to researchers, we, again, we try to find together with them, is there any, if you don't know already, like, is there any repository where you would normally go to find data? And they most often do have an idea. And so most of it does go into domain-specific. What do you think, Katerina?
Yes, I totally agree. As Arnold already mentioned, we are recommending the gold standards, which will be the domain-specific repositories. And if that's not possible, that's when we recommend people to go to the general repositories. So I would probably say somewhere around 80–90% goes into domain-specific, at least in the cohort that we have seen, which is related to COVID-19.
Thank you. Any more questions? If not, yes, Shmalia.
Yes, thank you so much, Arnold, for a very nice talk. I actually have been trying to submit some of our data into the data repository, and I always had some questions. I mean, we have human sensitive data that we are working with, and there I understand that we need to generate a metadata file specific for the data. But one thing that I wasn't sure was that is like, for example, we do have data at the Bianca. So is it that somehow the SciLifeLab data repository is kind of, we give a link to Bianca that without actually depositing the data into the data repository with just the meta file? Or is it that, I don't know if you get my question, but or is there some kind of space that is allocated to the users that, okay, this much space is given so that you can deposit your data via SciLifeLab repository?
Well, so if I understand it correctly, you are not allowed to share your data because it's sensitive data.
Yes.
And in that case, you should not share the data through the repository, but you can. What we recommend is that you make a metadata record. So you describe exactly what is the data, how it was acquired, and describe some of the parameters in the data, and then put that file with the description, purely description, and into the SciLifeLab data repository. In that case, you will receive a DOI, and you can then also mention that, or you should mention that in any publication related to this data. But the data itself does not need to come, or, I mean, it should not be deposited.
Okay.
So basically, you do not have to do anything with the data itself. You just need to describe the data in a good way, and then deposit it, and then create an entry in the data repository.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you so much.
And,
I just wanted to mention, I will add some information and links in the chat about this for more information.
Yes, thank you, Catherine.
thank you.